My hoseby and booked a honeymoon suite with a client. The hotel receipt told me who it really was. They say the wives are always the last to know. I thought that was a cheap cliché, a soap opera line to justify the naivety of women who didn't want to see the truth. But the day I found that crumpled receipt in his jacket pocket, I understood that clichés exist for a reason. And that reason has a first and last name. Honeymoon Suite, Grand Palacio Hotel. 2 nights, champagne included. My husband had booked the same suite where we spent our honeymoon 7 years ago, only this time, the receipt had another name next to his. A name I knew very well, a name that had called me friend for 15 years. A name that sat at my table every Christmas, that hugged me on my birthdays, that lent me her shoulder when I cried. Valeria, my best friend since university. And what I discovered after that receipt, that was just the beginning of a nightmare that ended up becoming my greatest revenge. To understand how I got to that moment, I need to tell you who I was before my world collapsed. My name is Carolina, though everyone calls me Caro. I am 34 years old, I am a certified public accountant, and for most of my adult life, I considered myself a fortunate woman. I grew up in a middle-class family, with parents who worked hard to give me and my younger brother an education. We weren't rich, but we never lacked anything important. Food on the table, new school supplies every year, and modest beach vacations every summer. I met Rodrigo at a business conference when I was 25. He was a financial advisor at a prestigious firm, 5 years older than me, with that air of confidence that men have who know exactly what they want. He asked me out for coffee after the conference, and 3 hours later we were still talking as if we had known each other our whole lives. "You are different," he told me, that first night, looking at me with those honey-colored eyes that melted me. "The women I meet only talk about clothes and gossip. You talk about goals, numbers, building something. I like that." I should have noticed the first red flag right there. A man who belittles other women to compliment you is not a man who respects women. But I was 25, dazzled by his perfect smile and his latest model BMW, and I thought I had found my soulmate. We got married 2 years later, in a beautiful garden wedding outside the city. Valeria was my maid of honor. I remember she cried throughout the ceremony, and I thought it was from emotion for me. Now I wonder if she was crying for a completely different reason. The first years were good, or at least, I thought they were. Rodrigo worked a lot, traveled constantly for business, but he always came back with gifts and promises that we would have more time together soon. I also worked hard, climbing positions at the company where I started as an assistant, until I became head of accounting. Together we bought a nice house in a good neighborhood, with a garden where I dreamed our children would someday play. But the children never came. Now is not the right time. Rodrigo would say every time I brought up the topic, "First we need complete financial stability. First I need that promotion. First, let's finish paying off the house." There was always a first, before my dream of being a mother. Valeria, on the other hand, would listen to me for hours when I confessed my frustration to her. We met at university, in a statistics class where we were the only two who were actually paying attention. She was everything I was not: outgoing, flirtatious, with that striking beauty of jet black hair and green eyes that made men turn to look at her on the street. I was more discreet, more serious, with my brown hair always pulled back in a practical ponytail and my conservative office suits. "Opposites attract," she told me once, when I asked her why we were such good friends being so different. "You keep me grounded, and I remind you that you have to have fun sometimes." Valeria never married. She had boyfriends. Of course, many boyfriends who came and went like the seasons. "I'm not made for commitment," she would say, laughing, tossing her perfect mane. "I prefer my freedom." What I didn't know was that her definition of freedom included sleeping with my husband. The first signs appeared about 2 years ago, though at the time I didn't recognize them as such. Rodrigo started working even more. His business trips became more frequent, longer. Sometimes he would leave on a Thursday and not return until Monday. "It's an important client," he would explain while packing his suitcase. "If I close this deal, it changes our lives." I would nod, understanding, proud to have such a hard-working and ambitious husband. I also started to notice that he was taking more care of his appearance. Rodrigo had always been vain, but suddenly he joined an exclusive gym, started using new colognes I hadn't given him, renewed his entire wardrobe with tighter, more modern suits. "Who are you dressing up so much for?" I asked him one night, half joking, half serious. He laughed, gave me a quick kiss on the forehead, and said, "For you, my love. Always for you." But his kisses didn't feel the same anymore. They were mechanical, obligatory, as if he were fulfilling a formality. Our intimacy became almost non-existent. When I tried to get close, he always had an excuse. He was tired, he had a headache, he had eaten too much, he had to get up early. "It's work stress," Valeria would tell me when I confessed my worries during our Wednesday lunches. "Men are like that, under pressure. Give him space, you'll see that when he closes that project, he'll be his old self again." How ironic that conversation seems now. She knew perfectly well why my husband no longer touched me. She was the reason. The day everything changed started like any other Tuesday in October. Rodrigo had left on a trip on Sunday, supposedly to a conference in another city. He had sent me some sporadic messages, photos of his hotel room, a selfie at the event restaurant. All very normal, very routine. I got home from work around 7 in the evening. I was exhausted. We had an audit at the office, and I had barely slept 4 hours in 3 days. All I wanted was a hot bath, my old pajamas, and to watch some silly show on television. I left my purse on the sofa and went straight to our bedroom to change. Passing by the closet, I noticed Rodrigo had left one of his jackets hanging on the door, probably because it didn't fit in his suitcase. It was one of my favorites. A navy blue jacket that looked spectacular on him. I don't know what compelled me to check it. Maybe it was instinct. Maybe it was the universe telling me it was time to wake up. I reached into the inner pocket, the one where he always kept his business cards, and my fingers touched a crumpled piece of paper. I took it out, unfolded it, and the world stopped. It was a receipt from the Grand Palacio Hotel, that elegant boutique hotel, where we had spent our honeymoon 7 years earlier. The hotel where Rodrigo had promised me eternal love while we drank champagne on a terrace overlooking the sea. Honeymoon suite, 2 nights, September 23rd. I did the math quickly. September 23rd had been 3 weeks ago. Rodrigo had supposedly been at an investment seminar in the capital. He had sent me photos of a convention center, had called me complaining about how boring the presentations were. But he hadn't been at any seminar. He had been in our honeymoon suite. My hands were shaking so much I almost dropped the receipt. I read it over and over, looking for some explanation, some mistake. Maybe it was an old receipt from our own honeymoon. Maybe there was an innocent reason. Then I saw the name. At the bottom of the receipt, where the guest is registered, there were 2 names. The first was Rodrigo Mendoza, my husband. The second was Valeria Santana, my best friend. I sat on the edge of the bed because my legs wouldn't hold me anymore. The receipt crumpled in my fist while a high-pitched buzzing filled my ears. It couldn't be true. There had to be an explanation. Maybe Valeria had accompanied him for work. Maybe it was a coincidence. Maybe nothing. Deep down, in that dark place where we keep the truths we don't want to see, I already knew the looks they exchanged when they thought I wasn't looking. The times Valeria mentioned things Rodrigo had told her that I didn't remember telling her. The way she always defended his absences, his silences, his excuses. Everything fit now with brutal clarity. I don't know how long I sat on that bed, staring at the receipt as if it were a death sentence. It could have been minutes or hours. The sun set outside and the room went dark, but I didn't move to turn on any lights. My first instinct was to call Rodrigo and scream at him, confront him, demand explanations, hear his lies in real time. But something stopped me. A small, cold, calculating voice I had never heard before whispered in my mind, "No, not yet. First you need proof. First you need to know everything." Because if I was going to destroy my marriage, if I was going to burn my 15-year friendship, I needed to be completely sure. I needed evidence they couldn't deny. I needed them to have nowhere to hide. I got up from the bed on trembling legs and turned on the light. The receipt was still there, crumpled but real. I smoothed it carefully and photographed it with my phone. Then I crumpled it again and put it back exactly where I had found it. Rodrigo couldn't know that I knew. Not yet. I went to the bathroom and looked at myself in the mirror. The woman looking back at me seemed 10 years older than she had that morning. Her eyes were red, her makeup smeared, her hair disheveled. But there was something else in that gaze. Something new. A cold determination I had never felt before. I turned on the faucet and washed my face with cold water. As the water ran, I made a decision. I was going to investigate every detail of this betrayal. I was going to document every lie. And when I had it all, when I knew exactly the extent of their deception, then I was going to make them pay. Both of them. The following weeks were the most difficult of my life, but also the most revealing. I learned to be an actress. When Rodrigo returned from his business trip, I welcomed him with a smile and a kiss. As always, I cooked his favorite dinner, asked him how the conference had gone, pretended interest in his made-up stories. Inside, every word that came out of his mouth was like a knife twisting in my stomach. "I missed you so much," he told me that night, hugging me in bed. "These trips are exhausting." "I know, my love," I replied, swallowing my disgust. "But think, it's for our future." I also kept seeing Valeria. Our Wednesday lunches continued as if nothing had changed. She would tell me about her work, about the new guy she was dating. Another lie, I understood now, about her vacation plans. "You're very quiet today," she said at one of those lunches, tilting her head with that fake expression of concern she had perfected over the years. "Is everything okay with Rodrigo?" "Yes, everything's perfect," I lied, poking at my salad without appetite. "I'm just tired. A lot of work." "You should take a few days off," she suggested, putting her hand over mine. "Maybe you and Rodrigo could escape for a romantic weekend somewhere. I don't know, a nice hotel with a spa." I almost choked on the water I was drinking. A nice hotel? Did she really have the nerve to suggest that to me? "Yeah, maybe," I managed to say when I regained my composure. "Maybe the Grand Palacio. That's where we spent our honeymoon." I saw the flash of panic in her green eyes before she managed to control it. It lasted just a fraction of a second. But I was watching. I was looking for exactly that reaction. "Ah, yes, you've told me about that place," she said, her voice too casual. "It sounds charming." Charming. That's how she described the place where she slept with my husband. While I acted my part of the ignorant wife and friend, I dedicated myself to investigating. I started with the most obvious: Rodrigo's phone. He had always been protective of his privacy, never let me touch it, changed his password every few weeks. But after 7 years of marriage, I had watched his fingers move across the screen enough times to deduce his pattern. One night, while he was sleeping deeply after a few glasses of wine, I took his phone and unlocked it. What I found left me breathless. He had a second messaging app hidden in a folder called Work Tools. Inside was a conversation with a contact saved as supplier MTZ, but it wasn't any supplier. The messages were explicit. Photos that made me physically sick, declarations of love he had never said to me, plans to meet, complaints about me. "Carolina again with her baby obsession," one of his messages said. "I don't know how I put up with this charade." "Soon, my love," she replied. "Soon we'll be together and you won't have to pretend anymore." I took screenshots of everything. Every message, every photo, every promise. I sent the images to my own email and then erased any trace that I had accessed his phone. But I didn't stop there. I hired a private investigator. Yes, it sounds like a movie, but it turns out those services exist and are more accessible than I thought. His name was Roberto, a man in his 50s with a kind grandfatherly face who had been a police officer for 3 decades before retiring. "What exactly do you need, ma'am?" he asked me at our first meeting, in a discreet cafe far from my area. "I need to know everything," I replied, surprised by the firmness in my own voice. "How long they've been together, where they meet. If there are other women, I need the complete truth." Roberto nodded, without judgment, without awkward questions. I warn you that sometimes the truth is worse than we imagine. I already imagine the worst, I said. Nothing can be more painful than what I already know. I was wrong. Roberto's report arrived 3 weeks later. We met at the same cafe, and he placed a thick folder on the table between us. "They're not good news," he said softly. "But you said you wanted to know everything." I opened the folder and started reading. The relationship between Rodrigo and Valeria hadn't started months ago, as I assumed. They had been together for almost 4 years. 4 years, more than half of my marriage, had been a lie. They had met that way at my own birthday party. According to messages Roberto had managed to obtain, my 30th birthday party, the one where I was so happy because Rodrigo finally seemed to be making an effort to get along with my friends. That night, while I was toasting with my colleagues in the living room, they had shared their first kiss in the backyard of my own house. "Your wife doesn't deserve you," Valeria had told him that night, according to a message she sent him days later recalling the moment. "She's so boring, so predictable. You need someone who truly understands you." And he had agreed. The report included photographs. Roberto had followed them for weeks, documenting their meetings. At elegant restaurants he had never taken me to. At her apartment, where he entered with his own key. At luxury hotels all over the region, including 3 more visits to the Grand Palacio that I was unaware of. But the worst, the thing that made me feel the ground opening beneath my feet, was on the last page of the report. A bank deposit receipt. Rodrigo had been transferring money to an account in Valeria's name for the last 2 years. They weren't small amounts, 10,000 here, 15,000 there. In total, according to Roberto's calculations, he had given her more than 200,000 pesos. Money from our joint accounts. Money that was supposed to be for our house, for our future, for those children he never wanted to have with me. "There's something else," Roberto said, pointing to the last document in the folder. It was a deed. Rodrigo had put down the down payment for an apartment in Valeria's name. An apartment in an exclusive area of the city, with a park view, 2 bedrooms, with a small study perfect for working from home. The apartment where they planned to live together when he finally left me. I closed the folder and stayed silent for several minutes. Roberto waited patiently, probably used to these reactions after so many years in the business. "Are you okay?" he finally asked. "No," I replied honestly. "But I will be, because in the midst of the pain, in the midst of the humiliation and rage, something else was being born inside me. A plan, a cold, calculated determination I didn't know I was capable of feeling. Rodrigo and Valeria thought they had me fooled. They thought I was the dumb wife, the naive friend who would never suspect anything. They thought they could steal my money, my trust, my years of life, and that I would never find out. They were very wrong. "Roberto," I said, putting the folder in my purse, "I'm going to need you to keep investigating. I want to know everything about my husband's finances, accounts I don't know about, investments, properties, everything." The investigator nodded. "May I ask what you plan to do with all this information?" I smiled, and I'm sure that smile had nothing friendly about it. "I'm going to get back what's mine," I replied, "and I'm going to make sure they lose everything." During the next month, I became someone I barely recognized. By day, I continued to be the perfect wife and loyal friend. I cooked for Rodrigo, listened to Valeria's complaints about her work, attended family dinners with an impeccable smile. At night, when everyone slept, I transformed into a kind of obsessive detective, organizing my evidence, consulting with a lawyer specializing in divorces, planning every detail of my revenge. The lawyer, a serious man named Licenciado Paredes, had given me very valuable information about my legal options. "Given that you can prove infidelity and misappropriation of marital funds," he explained in one of our secret meetings, "you are entitled to a significantly larger portion of the marital assets. Furthermore, you can sue for the return of the funds illegally transferred to third parties." "Can I get back the money he gave her?" I asked. "Potentially, yes. If we can prove those funds came from marital accounts and were transferred without your consent and knowledge, there are legal precedents to demand their return." That meant I wasn't just going to divorce Rodrigo, taking most of our assets. I was also going to sue Valeria to recover every cent my husband had gifted her with my money. But legal revenge wasn't enough for me. I wanted more. I wanted the world to know who they really were. I wanted their families, their friends, their colleagues, everyone to know the kind of people they were behind their perfect masks. And for that, I needed the perfect stage. The opportunity came in the most unexpected way. Rodrigo's mother was going to celebrate her 70th birthday with a big party. The whole family would be there, along with close friends and business associates. It was the social event of the year for his family. And Valeria, of course, was invited, because over the years, with my naive help, she had practically become part of the Mendoza family. Rodrigo's mother adored her. His sisters treated her like another cousin. No one suspected a thing. The perfect stage for a perfect revelation. "Are you sure you want to do it this way?" Roberto asked, when I told him my plan. "Once it happens, there's no going back." "I don't want to go back," I replied. "I want everyone to see exactly who they are. I want Rodrigo to lose his family's respect. That respect that matters so much to him. I want Valeria to lose the good girl mask she's worn all her life. I want them to understand that actions have consequences." The plan was elaborate but simple in essence. During the party, when the time came for speeches and toasts, I would take the microphone. I would project onto the big screen, the one they had installed to show family photos, a very different presentation. Screenshots of messages, photos from the investigator, bank receipts, everything. And then I would give everyone present the opportunity to see the true face of Rodrigo Mendoza and his special client. But before the party, I had to make some preparations. First, I moved money. Discreetly, without raising suspicion, I transferred my personal savings to an account Rodrigo didn't know about. I sold some jewelry I had inherited from my grandmother and kept the cash in a safe deposit box. If things got ugly after the revelation, I needed my own resources. Second, I secured my documents: passport, house title deed, which was in both our names, investment certificates. Everything went into the safe deposit box, along with the cash. Third, I prepared my exit. I rented a small apartment in another part of the city, paying 3 months in advance in cash. I took clothes, personal hygiene items, and everything I needed to start over there. The night of the party, I would not return to the house I had shared with Rodrigo. And fourth, I created the presentation. This was the most difficult thing emotionally, because it meant reliving every betrayal, every lie, every humiliation. But it was also the most satisfying, because with each slide I put together, I felt I was reclaiming a little of my power. The presentation started with a photo from our wedding, Rodrigo and I smiling at the altar. The title said 7 years of marriage and 4 years of lies. What followed was devastating. The day of the party arrived, a cool, clear Saturday in November. I dressed with special care. A red dress the color of revenge, I thought with irony, that looked spectacular on me. High heels, impeccable makeup, hair down in waves. If I was going to destroy my marriage in public, at least I was going to look incredible doing it. Rodrigo looked at me with surprise when I came down the stairs. "Wow," he said, raising his eyebrows. "All that for my mom's party? One should always look good." I replied with a smile that didn't reach my eyes. "Besides, I want to make a good impression. It's a special day." He had no idea how special it would become. The party was held in an elegant hall the family had rented for the occasion. There were about 100 guests, relatives, lifelong friends, Rodrigo's work colleagues. The tables were decorated with white flowers, a band was playing soft music, and there was a large screen in the background where they would later project a video of family photos. Or so everyone thought. Valeria arrived alone, as always. She wore a tight black dress that accentuated every curve, her hair pulled back in an elegant bun that exposed her neck. When she saw me, her face lit up with that fake smile I had mistaken for affection for 15 years. "Caro, you look gorgeous," she exclaimed, hugging me effusively. "That red looks incredible on you." "Thank you," I replied, returning the hug. You also look spectacular, as always. Rodrigo approached to greet her, and I saw the exchange of looks. They thought I didn't notice that secret complicity, that silent promise. At another time, it would have destroyed me. Now it only confirmed I was doing the right thing. I'm going to get something to drink, I said, moving away from them. I'll be right back. But I didn't go to the bar. I went to the sound table, where a young technician was handling the music and audio-visual equipment. Hi, I said with my best smile. I'm Doña Carmen's daughter-in-law, the guest of honor. Could you do me a favor? I have a special presentation for her, but it's a surprise. Do you think you could project it when I give you the signal? Sure, ma'am, replied the young man, unaware of what he was about to unleash. Just put it on a USB drive, and that's it. I handed him the USB drive I was carrying in my purse. When you see me take the microphone, project this, I said. It's going to be the most important moment of the night. Dinner proceeded normally. I sat next to Rodrigo at the main table, smiling for photos, applauding the relatives' speeches, toasting to my mother-in-law's health. Valeria was at a nearby table, and every time our eyes met, she smiled at me with that manufactured warmth. I enjoyed every second of her ignorance. When they served the cake and the formal speeches started, I knew my moment had come. Rodrigo's older brother had just finished his emotional toast, and the MC was asking if anyone else wanted to say a few words. I stood up. I would like to say something, I announced, and my voice sounded surprisingly firm. Rodrigo looked at me with curiosity, perhaps a little nervousness. Valeria frowned slightly. The rest of the guests smiled, expecting another tender speech about family. I approached the stage and took the microphone. I looked towards the sound table and nodded slightly. Good evening, everyone. I began as the screen behind me came to life. First of all, I want to wish Doña Carmen a happy birthday. 70 years of life, surrounded by family and love. What a blessing, right? The guests applauded. My mother-in-law blew me a kiss from her table. But tonight, besides celebrating Doña Carmen, I want to share with you a story about trust, betrayal, and the people we think we know. A murmur of confusion began to spread through the hall. The first slide appeared on the screen. Our wedding photo. 7 years ago, I married the man I believed was the love of my life. Rodrigo promised to love me, respect me, and be faithful to me until death do us part. I moved to the next slide, a text message. I love you more than I ever loved Carolina. Soon we will be together forever. The silence in the hall was absolute. It turns out that for Rodrigo, until death do us parts meant until I find something better. And he found it, in my best friend. The next slide was a photo from Roberto. Rodrigo and Valeria entering her apartment together, him with his own key in hand. The stamped date was from just 2 weeks earlier. I heard my mother-in-law's choked scream. The murmurs turned into exclamations. Rodrigo stood up, his face white as paper. "Caro, what are you doing?" he shouted. "This is crazy." "Crazy," I replied calmly. "Maybe, but at least it's not a 4-year lie." I showed more slides, more messages, more photos, the bank receipts. 200,000 pesos, I read aloud. That's money from our joint accounts. Money my husband transferred to his lover. Money for trips, gifts. And this, I showed the apartment deed. An apartment, in Valeria Santana's name, the love nest, where they planned to live when Rodrigo finally decided to leave me. Because yes, they had plans. Plans that didn't include me, except as the dumb wife who financed everything unknowingly. I looked for Valeria in the hall. She was frozen in her seat, her face distorted, tears running down her cheeks, ruining her perfect makeup. "Valeria," I said directly to her, "you were my best friend for 15 years. You were at my wedding. You comforted me when I cried, because my husband wouldn't touch me, knowing perfectly well that the reason was you. You slept in my house, ate at my table, and the whole time you were stealing my life from under me." "Caro, please," she sobbed. "Let me explain." "There's nothing to explain." I cut her off. "The evidence speaks for itself." I turned to the guests, to Rodrigo's family who were looking at me with a mixture of horror and fascination. I want everyone to know who the man they admired really is. The successful professional, the devoted son, the exemplary husband, it's all a facade. Behind it is a liar, a thief who stole his wife's money to give to his mistress, and a coward who never had the courage to be honest. Rodrigo walked towards the stage, his face twisted with fury. "That's enough," he shouted. "This is a public humiliation. You're going to regret this." "Me regret it," I replied without moving from my spot. "Me, who was faithful for 7 years. Me, who worked and saved while you spent our money on another woman. Me, who gave up being a mother because you said it wasn't the right time, when in reality you just didn't want to have children with me." My voice broke on that last part, but I quickly recomposed myself. "No, Rodrigo. The only one who should feel shame here is you and her." What happened next was chaos. Rodrigo's mother fainted and had to be taken out of the hall. His sisters were crying, divided between indignation towards him and shame that everything had come to light in that way. Rodrigo's father, a traditionalist man who had always boasted about family values, approached his son and, without saying a word, slapped him so hard it echoed through the hall. "You are a disgrace to this family," he said, before walking away. Valeria tried to slip away, but Rodrigo's older sister intercepted her at the door. "Where do you think you're going?" she yelled. "You hooked up with my brother and ruined Caro's life, and now you want to leave as if nothing happened." "I didn't ruin anything," Valeria defended herself. "Their marriage was already bad before I came along." "Before you came along?" I interrupted, approaching them. "Valeria, you've been sleeping with my husband for 4 years. 4 years planning how to take over my life. Don't you dare play the victim now." "You don't understand," she sobbed. "Rodrigo and I really love each other. You were just an obstacle." "An obstacle," I repeated, savoring the word. "That's how you see me after 15 years of friendship, as an obstacle." Valeria didn't respond. She had no answer. I moved closer to her until our faces were inches apart. "Listen to me carefully," I said quietly, but loud enough for those around us to hear. "First thing tomorrow morning, my lawyers are filing a lawsuit against you for the 200,000 pesos you received from marital accounts. We are also going to challenge the deed to that apartment. And when I'm done with you, you're going to have to go back to your parents' house to explain to them how you lost everything by sleeping with a married man." The color drained from her face. "You can't do that," she whispered. "Oh, I can, and I will." I turned and walked towards the exit. I didn't look back. I didn't need to see the destruction I was leaving behind. I just needed to get to my car, to my new life, away from the ashes of the old one. The following months were an emotional roller coaster of legal battles. The divorce was easier than expected. With all the evidence I had gathered, Licenciado Paredes negotiated a very favorable settlement for me. I got the house, 60% of our joint investments, and additional compensation for the funds Rodrigo had diverted to Valeria. The case against Valeria was more complicated. She hired a mediocre lawyer who tried to argue that the gifts were voluntary presents and that she had no obligation to return them. But the judge disagreed. When he saw the documentation that the money came from marital accounts and had been transferred without my knowledge or consent, he ordered Valeria to return 170,000 pesos, the maximum that could be recovered after legal expenses, and what she had spent irretrievably. She also lost the apartment. It turned out Rodrigo, in his haste to get rid of me, had committed fraud by using marital funds to buy it. The deed was annulled, the property was sold, and the money was incorporated into the divorce settlement. Valeria ended up ruined. She had to move back in with her parents. At 34 years old, carrying the shame of everyone in her social circle, knowing exactly why she was there. Her company, where she was a human resources manager, fired her when the scandal reached the board of directors. Apparently, companies don't want a woman known for destroying marriages handling their ethics policies. Rodrigo didn't fare much better. His reputation was destroyed in his family's business circle. His father, publicly humiliated, excluded him from the family businesses he someday expected to inherit. His most important clients stopped trusting him. After all, if he was capable of cheating on his wife for 4 years, what guarantee was there that he wouldn't cheat in business too? The last I heard of him, he was working at a second-tier firm in another city, trying to rebuild his career away from where everyone knew his story. And Valeria tried to contact me again a few weeks after the trial. She sent me a long message, full of apologies and excuses. She said she had been swept away by love, that she never meant to hurt me, that she hoped I could forgive her someday. I didn't reply. I blocked her number, her social media, any possible form of communication. Some betrayals are too deep for forgiveness. A year has passed since that night at the party. My life now is completely different, and not just in the obvious ways. Yes, I live alone in the house I once shared with Rodrigo, after completely redecorating it to erase any trace of him. Yes, my financial situation is stable thanks to the divorce settlement and my own work. Yes, I no longer have a best friend or a husband. But the most important changes are the ones you can't see. I learned to trust my intuition. All those times I felt something was wrong, all those red flags I ignored because I didn't want to see the truth. I listen to them now. My instinct protected me before I paid attention to it, and I promise not to ignore it again. I learned that courage isn't the absence of fear. The day I went up on that stage, I was terrified. My hands were shaking, my heart was beating so hard I thought it would explode, but I did it anyway. I did what I needed to do to reclaim my dignity, even though my knees were shaking. And I learned that I deserve more. I deserve someone who truly loves me, not as a consolation prize while waiting for their true love. I deserve genuine friendships, not people who use me as cover for their secrets. I deserve honesty, respect, and loyalty. Have I found that? Not yet. I'm not actively looking. For now, I'm focused on healing, on rebuilding myself, on discovering who I am without a husband who defined me and a friend who betrayed me. But I have hope. The other day, cleaning out the closet, I found an old receipt. It wasn't the hotel receipt. I burned that months ago in a small private ceremony of liberation. It was a receipt from our first date, from that cafe where Rodrigo and I talked for hours over a decade ago. I looked at it for a long moment, remembering the woman I was then, naive, yes, too trusting, no doubt, but also full of hope, of dreams, of the capacity to love. That woman still exists within me. She's a little more cautious now, a little wiser, but she still believes in love, in kindness, in the possibility of finding people who are worth it. I crumpled the old receipt and threw it in the trash. I didn't need to keep it. I didn't need to cling to the past. The future was waiting. If you are listening to this story, I want to make one thing clear. This is not a manual on how to get revenge on an unfaithful husband. Revenge, though satisfying in the moment, doesn't heal you. It doesn't erase the pain. It doesn't bring back the lost years or the destroyed trust. What I can tell you is this: when someone betrays you, you have the right to defend yourself. You have the right to the truth. You have the right for consequences to reach those who hurt you. You don't have to stay silent to protect people who didn't protect you. And even more importantly, you have the right to rebuild your life, to reinvent yourself, to discover that you are stronger, more resilient, and more capable than you ever imagined. I was the cheated wife, the betrayed friend, the woman who discovered that everything she believed was real was a lie, but that no longer defines me. Now I am a woman who faced the worst imaginable betrayal and came out the other side, not just surviving, but thriving. The honeymoon suite my husband booked with my best friend was the end of my life as I knew it, but it was also the beginning of something new, something better, something completely my own. And that, in the end, is worth more than any revenge.